Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. Today we have the 1/72nd scale Vought Kingfisher Mark I from AZ model. Let's have a look. First sprue, we've got upper wing halves, fuselage halves, tail planes, the outrigger floats, and what I would assume be wheels for, well, there was a wheeled version of the float plane, but I don't think we're using those. Nice subtle fabric texture on the flaps, ailerons, on the wings, the rudder, and the elevators. Very restrained compared to some other kits. A little bit of texture on the plastic, but nothing crazy. Panel lines look pretty good. Relatively sharp. Not too deep. They get a little shallow in some spots, but overall not too bad. These are short run kits, of course. Little bit of flash. And some relatively chunky sprue attachments. Got some big ejector pins on the insides of the wings and the fuselage, and handy AZ model 2018. So with that big greenhouse canopy, we'll probably have to get those cleaned up, and definitely have to get the sprue attachments cleaned up for the wings to go together properly. Hopefully those struts are going to be strong enough to hold the floats in place. Not too bad looking, all things considered. Second sprue, we've got our main centerline float. We got our lower wing halves, engine cowling, the engine, some bulkheads and instrument panels and various other little bits and pieces. Engine, not too bad. Some flash around the perimeter, but we do have, the cooling fins molded and the push rods. Not the best radial engine I've ever seen, but not the worst. Couple options: single and twin mount 30 cal machine guns. Got our instrument panel, basic, but at least it's something. Seat looks good. Couple of bombs, very basic. Still nice consistent panel lines on the wing. Not too wide, not too deep. Maybe a little shallow in some spots, but you can always make it deeper. At least they are consistent going around 90 degrees to the mold. Even some mainstream kits, the panel lines sort of shallow out as soon as you get to where the molds meet. These are at least consistent in that regard. More big ejector pins on the inside of the wings, have to take care of those. Floats aren't going to be of any issue. Ones in the cowling are probably going to be okay. I would assume the engine fits in front of that rib. Some heavy mold lines on most parts and a little bit of flash here and there. Worse than some, but better than others. And our clear sprue. Got the rear section and the windshield and pilot's section all together here. Fair amount of distortion, but parts are relatively clear. I'm not sure if that's in the plastic or maybe the molds weren't polished enough. It's not bad, but not great. You might be able to polish those up a little bit, but wouldn't spend too much time on the inside, because you're probably not going to see all of it unless you were to cut some of these open. But framing is nice and positive, so masking shouldn't be a huge issue. Doesn't get too soft. All right angles, so no weird radius in the corners to deal with. No flash, which is a good thing. Looks well molded, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And our decals. Got your typical British style roundels and your Royal Australian Air Force roundels. They don't seem overly thick. Whites look really good. I believe these are printed as opposed to your typical silkscreen decals, because you do see a little bit of the I guess the dot matrix, I believe is the right term. You can see all the little spots of individual color, mostly on the dark blue and the red. White looks very good, and these and post-war style roundels, those look very good actually. Those almost look like silkscreen decals. You can barely discern any sort of printing dots on there. And black is really good. So, not the best decals, but definitely not the worst. And I have used AZ's decals before. They do lay down very well. So those should be drama-free. And the instructions. Nice big history on the Kingfisher. It was an American shipboard float plane, typically launched off the battleships and cruisers and whatnot for artillery spotting and reconnaissance. Sprue map. Looks like just a picture of the sprues superimposed on a white background. Legend, color callouts. And because parts are not numbered on the sprues, you're going to be referring to the sprue map if you don't know what you're looking for. Okay, looks like we're starting with the rear machine gun ring. So you've got option of either twin or single mount 30 cals. Then the little piece in between the pilot and the observer. Engine goes into the cowling, prop goes on, exhaust stubs go in. Of course, you'd want to leave the propeller off until the very end. The pilot's bulkhead, pilot's seat, control column, all of the instrument panel, all of that goes into the halves. Fuselage halves go together. And our main float, wing halves, of course, we should take care of those ejector pins. And then outer floats with the struts go in. Racks with our bombs. Okay, we do get some few pieces for the beaching gear. So that's gonna, if you're not good at making water bases, then you've got an option for putting it on its wheels, so to speak. Or you could put the undercarriage on as well, although I don't believe any of the decal schemes use those. And with that, you've got a complete Kingfisher. Straight and to the point. Just definitely want to make sure all your parts fit. There's definitely going to be a lot of seam cleanup, making sure wings and tail planes and everything lines up. You're going to want to spend a lot of time on those floats and the struts, making sure everything's lined up and securely fastened. But not a lot of fluff, straight and to the point. And our paint schemes. We've got a Fleet Air Arm aircraft and your typical extra dark sea gray, dark slate gray sky paint scheme. And two Australian, very colorful, might I add, Australian aircraft, a bare metal aircraft, and an overall yellow from the Australian Polar Expedition in 1946. So not your typical humdrum blue American ones, definitely some colorful options. And I believe these Fleet Air Arm ones were pretty used and abused, so you might have a chance to do a lot of weathering on one of those. And if you want to do practice masking and painting your own markings, those Australian roundels are always a good excuse. So, AZ Models Kingfisher, as with any short run kit, looks pretty darn good on the sprues. The proof is going to be in the actual assembly, how well the parts fit, how well things line up, how much trial and tribulation we have to go through getting it together. But sometimes a little challenge is not a bad thing. This sample was kindly provided by AZ Models. Thank you very much. We will be doing a build review of this kit when time allows, so if you don't want to miss out on that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time.